Welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and most certainly make fun of them. Today, I'm going to be doing part 6 of the story, titled, My Fiancée is helping her sister cheat on her husband, so I'm informing him and canceling the wedding. And guys, it's been a while since I've covered this story. It's been about 3 weeks. I was covering the multiple parts, 5 parts of that over the course of a few days. And then I had to take off and leave to Florida to close on my house. And I was informed recently that the story had updates. I didn't know about this because I was gone for like 9 days. So I'm going to continue on with this part here. Maybe you saw it before, I don't know, but I know a lot of you guys like hearing me do it anyway, so I'm going to do it. And as you all recall, real quick recap, that's about the guy who was all set to be married in a few months. Not even that, less than a few months. And found out that his fiancée was covering up her sister's affair. Her sister was cheating on her husband. It's been going on for a while. A lot of that going on, and he then just says, there's no way I can be married to this gal because she's someone that's cool with someone else cheating and helping. There's no way. And of course, it goes through a whole SHIT storm with him informing to the guy who's being cheated on, getting the sister in trouble, all this turmoil going back and forth, telling the girl that the wedding is over, and you all recall. So now we're here on part 6 to see where things have gone, and let me tell you, it's still a big, giant fiasco. Now, it's a long one, but I know a lot of you guys like long stories, so definitely grab your popcorn for a Friday afternoon or early evening. So it says here, or it picks up saying, this update has taken longer to get around to than I originally intended. A lot of things have happened over the last couple of days that have kept me pretty busy, and it really wasn't until today, when I had some free time after lunch, that I could sit down and get this all out. I'll try to get through this as much as I can. Before that, however, I just want to mention a couple things in response to comments from the last post. I will try to be brief. Firstly, I don't know much of what's going on with Marty and his divorce. Other than to my knowledge, he's still divorcing her. Well, good for Marty, because he most certainly should. Marty, if you recall characters, Marty is the husband of Evelyn. This dude telling the story, his fiancée is Sarah, her sister's Evelyn, and the husband's Marty. And of course, Marty should be divorcing her. Obviously, no papers or anything yet, but their intention is clear. In addition to that, I'm not really in the position to be advocating for any sort of course of action that Marty should take, or offering him legal advice, or assisting him in doing anything to the other man, or tracking down the other man's wife, etc. Marty is a grown man, and he can do whatever he wants with the situation, and my position, as his friend, is just to support him and offer advice if he asks for it. Best thing you can do. You already helped him out, and if he needs you, he'll reach out, and just be supportive. Secondly, this isn't some sort of guerrilla marketing campaign for the OnlyFans girl. If it was, I should have done it in the first post, which hit the front page of Reddit and was seen by over 3 million people. Holy shit, this guy's story is seen by 3 million people? He's referring to the OnlyFans girl in the last part. His brother in Australia was talking to this OnlyFans gal through her member of the OnlyFans website, and I guess talking to her, which ain't cool. And so that's what he's talking about. He mentioned the OnlyFans girl's name, and apparently the OnlyFans girl got a lot of attention because of that. Her dream come true. Also, given this post got so popular on Reddit, it's not really a surprise that Bimbo Wife Mandy, that's her name, another Redditor, happened to be following this story and saw her name. It could have easily been any of the other hundreds and hundreds of maybe even thousands of girls who use Reddit to post their pictures. And as a brief aside, speaking of Mandy, I've indeed talked to her. She was actually quite helpful in confirming something for me, and as the person, she seems like quite nice, but guys, there is no romance plans for here in the future. Mandy is married, evidently quite happy so for almost 2 decades. I think the handle Bimbo Wife Mandy should be given that way. And frankly, while her husband must be cool with it, she seems way too much for a mere insurance guy like me to handle. Seriously. So with all that out of the way, on to the update. I don't know if you guys could hear, but there's this car alarm going off, and I was trying to read while the goddamn car alarm was going off. That's why I was kind of not reading too well there. On to the update. Last time I wrote in, I ended up with me assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy, but it was too late. It's time for me to contact him. I'm one of those guys that once a problem is put in front of him, I must be actively working on trying to solve it. This is great for my career choice, but in situations like this, I was doing all but driving myself insane. So I decided to take a deep breath, leave everything until later, and carry on what I needed to do. First thing up was attempting to contact every person from my side that I had invited to the wedding and that I had not yet informed about the cancellation. As you may recall, I had already informed my parents and had them contact my relatives on the day I made up my mind, but only myself and Sarah had the complete guest list, so I needed to do the rest myself. Well, she's not going to do it. Out of respect for my friends, I decided to call instead of text, but this might have been a bad idea since every phone call typically resulted in a rather lengthy explanation of why I was canceling the wedding. Probably would have been better to text. It's impersonal, but you know what? Every single person is going to want to talk to him for like half an hour or more. Are you sure? What happened? Blah, 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 and he can't get anything done. I know I could have given some other excuse, but I want people to know that I wasn't being frivolous or just experiencing something inane like cold feet. It was important, not just my own reputation, but I think in order to show respect to the people who had agreed to come on that day, to support myself and Sarah as a couple. Because of this, it wasn't until late in the evening when I finally managed to contact everyone, which meant I was now morning time in Australia. He spent all day and night calling people. I knew what needed to be done, but I wanted to make sure that my ducks were in a row. So I took a breather and made a sandwich in the kitchen. I noticed that Sarah wasn't home. I had no idea when she left and sat down to eat and think about what to do with my brother's situation. Let's call my brother Carl for the sake of shortness here. Now, Carl and I have always been pretty close despite him being 13 years older than me. He was a sort of quasi-parental figure in my life because by the time I became capable of having long-term memories, he was already well on his way to becoming an adult. He was always very generous with his time, played with his little brother when other teenagers would probably have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed very mature and wishing me wise to me growing up. Suffice to say, I respected him greatly. Okay, remember that when you're ready to tear your brother a new one for his OnlyFans activities and all that now, and hopefully it's just him looking at pictures and nothing like an affair going on. The idea that he had been sexting with a girl, that's what he was doing. Okay, that wasn't cool, but then again, when you hear these stories about these guys messaging these OnlyFans girls, I have heard that these OnlyFans girls, they're not the ones responding to this. They're hiring somebody else on the other side of the world, paying them peanuts to respond to the messages because it's cheaper that way. He's been sexting with a girl who wasn't his wife in my house was something that I was still coming to grips with, and I needed to decide what to do. Talking about it was obvious, but at this point, given how much of a shambles my relationship with Sarah was, I didn't know if I cared about having him confess just for the sake of clearing my name. Was there anything to salvage anyway? I needed to, for my own sake of propriety, at least yell at him about this and convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out or not to my sister-in-law. Let's call her Karen. Really, Karen? Carl and Karen. It all depended on what he told me and if I believed him or not. I finished my meal and logged into Facebook and video called Carl. Now, Carl works mostly from home as a remote worker since his field is related to IT, and he's almost always available during the day, and today was no exception. It didn't even ring for more than once or twice before he answered. We greeted each other and exchanged some pleasantries, and then I just sort of dove into it and asked him if he'd been using my computer to SCX chat women on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and it leaned over out of frame of the camera. He was obviously closing his office door. He says, "Yeah, I did. Why?" I swore under my breath and explained to Carl how Sarah had thought that his flirting was me since he used my computer. That's right. That's right. In the other story, I forgot that because it's been 3 weeks. This dude's ex-fiancée, now Sarah, found evidence in his computer that she thought this guy was doing this, but it was his brother in Australia that was talking to these OnlyFans girls. I explained that I wasn't happy to take the hit for him, and I asked him point blank if Karen knew about this or not. He waffled for a few seconds, stumbling over his words, and then looked a bit sheepish and said no. Karen did not know, and he preferred it was kept that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been pretty rough since their youngest was born 4 years ago, mainly in the bedroom department. Carl had always been a pretty private person, especially when it came to intimate details, or at least he had always been that way when talking to his much younger baby brother. However, this time he just let it all out. Things have been bad. He'd been tired of getting rejected. Karen was always tired no matter what he did or how much he helped out around the house. Eventually, this led to problems on his side. Some sort of performance anxiety on the few occasions where Karen would actually feel up for some bedroom fun, and things just got worse from there. So it was a big vicious cycle. Talk about a stereotypical marriage, particularly with little kids. Basically, he said, there's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding children that would get me laid. It just was not happening. So I started to spend time in my office at night working. He even did the finger quotes when saying this. Oh, well, like me. So it sounds like this guy was doing everything to please her, and that was just turning her off. What he should have been doing is laying down the law, saying, look, baby, I got needs. And if they're not being met, then this obviously marriage is not going to work out. And I'm willing to bet you, if he handled it right, things would have been different. But a lot of guys try the nice guy approach, being a big giant pleaser and kissing her ass, and then I got turning women on. Strength turns women on. Evidently, his working at night turned into a pretty hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites, which given the relative privacy he had in his office for legitimate work, spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked him if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down he was not. I thought I believed him when he said it. He seemed to be sincere, but I just had this nagging feeling in the back of my skull that something was off. Trust your gut. Maybe it was because of all the deceit I had encountered recently, but I was doubting my own brother, who had really been a stand-up guy to me our entire lives together. I really hated being in this situation. Now, the problem I faced was a pretty complex tier. First, if I wanted to clear my name, then I would have to get my brother to tell Sarah that it was him all along. However, if he did that, then there was no guarantee that Sarah wouldn't spitefully inform Karen. I personally thought it would be best if Karen knew, but at the same time, I didn't know if I felt comfortable potentially dropping a nuke on my brother's marriage over something he not only said that he stopped, but is also the sort of moral gray area for me. Yeah, it's your brother, yet he's doing something that caused issues with your relationship, but at the end of the day, she did what she did. Yeah, it's a tough one. I didn't have an answer to this right now as to what to do, but I did urge him to tell his wife about this and to get into marriage counseling. He said that they actually had been going for the last 6 months, and while it was helpful, what had really helped him was getting a prescription for some generic Viagra. I actually did a spit take at that, neatly spraying my computer screen with water. He told me that they had been trying to make sure they had intimate time at least a couple times a week, and the Viagra had cured him of his performance anxiety to the point where now they both were looking forward to spending time together after the kids went to bed. Well, that's good to hear. The general gist of this was something along the lines of, hey, this is actually going in the right direction now. Please don't screw this up for us. I really, really, really didn't want to be in the position, not just for the sake of Carl and Karen, but for my two nieces as well. And if what Carl was telling me the truth, I could be tossing a firebomb into a relationship that was starting to mend. It was unpredictable what would happen, so yeah, it may disappoint some people, but at the time, I felt his best option that I had was to wait and see. I was, after all, going to meet him in a couple of weeks in the flesh, and once I got him alone in the room and a few drinks into him, I was going to definitely get to the bottom of this. It seemed like the best course of action. Yeah, get a few drinks in him, and he'll tell you, he'll sing like a choir. Anyway, that night I went to bed early. I didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked haggard, like she had a distinct lack of sleep. I asked her where she had been, mostly out of habit, after we'd all been together for almost 6 years. She told me that she had gone down to the courthouse for Evelyn's arraignment to post bail. If you all recall, when that whole thing went down, the sister went crazy and attacked this guy, and everything was nuts. There we go with the car alarm again. And that afterwards, she had driven to her parents' house and spent the evening. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to have had to explain to her parents that I'd called off the wedding. Well, tough shit. You should have been covering up for your sister and talking shit about your brother-in-law and doing all these awful things behind the scenes. Tough shit, honey. I asked her if her parents knew the reason why, and she barked, of course they do. I tried to remain calm, but at this point in this ordeal, I was losing it. I bit back at her. Are you going to move back there so that they both have girls at home right now? It was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Evelyn out of jail annoyed me to no end. I said, you don't need to be an ass. She says, you don't need to be an ass about this. To which I said, and you don't need to be Evelyn's effing underling. I could see Sarah visibly flinch when I said that to her. It obviously had struck a chord with the corners of her eyes, started to tear up, and cooled my temper. We just should have stood there, miles apart in the living room in our own house, and didn't say anything for a good, solid minute or two, until Sarah decided to continue talking. She said, our parents are going to be here at 3. I actually face-palmed at this. I was about to go off on her for not consulting me on this, but decided that was just my ego. After all, I did need to sit down with them and work out the details around the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had, and I needed to, at least once, face-to-face explain to everyone why this wasn't happening. So fine, let's do this and get it out of the way. Yeah, I like how she conveniently didn't mention before the parents are coming over, but yeah, they got to deal with this. There's deposits for the wedding, a lot of money spent, etc., etc. I try to make myself busy, but there isn't much you can do on a Sunday except waste time, and time wasting isn't very enjoyable when you know you're heading into a meat grinder in just a few hours. Still, 3 p.m. came, and so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sarah had bought just a month after we closed on the house. It was secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because it was a solid oak with a beautiful finish and capable of seating 8 people. She always wanted to have big dinner parties with our families, just not like this. The next 3 hours were gruesome. Oh, I can imagine. No one was happy, nor should I guess they would be. The best support I could get came unsurprisingly from my own parents, but even that was tempered, essentially along the lines of, well, it's his decision to make, which more or less means, yeah, we think it's crazy too, but we're still backing him. Honestly, that was fine with me. I didn't need my parents to get the stigma by associating of canceling the wedding. I was fine with owning that. Even if they were all against this guy doing it, guess what? His business is his freaking life. He's got good reasons for this. End of story. Let's be honest, their motives here. They all want to be grandparents. And they all want to have the wedding, and they can have their friends and brag and all that. They've been looking forward to this since they were little kids. Let's be honest here. There's self-interest in this. Eventually, we worked out a decent deal in regards to the wedding. We would try to get back whatever money we could, split it back, however it was contributed. Some things like the honeymoon were all paid by me, or the flowers that were paid for by Sarah's parents, and then eat whatever losses that were communal. However, when it came to the subject of the house, Sarah objected to the idea of paying back her parents for the deposit. Basically, she didn't intend to move. And that's where we have the problem. She doesn't want to move, and she owns a piece of that house. Now, as you might imagine, Sarah and I hadn't talked really about the us or living situation in too much detail. The fact that I even brought up settling the house equity seemed to shock her, because the implication here is that I expect her to move out of her home. She threw a fit, and I don't blame her. I should have settled our relationship status with her first before trying to negotiate a payment plan with her parents. It really tipped my hand to everyone about how I was feeling about our relationship, and while I think our parents expected it, or at least understood, Sarah was beside herself. She was absolutely not accepting of us breaking up over this, and she made it clear. Well, here's the deal. We're breaking up. You can't force me to be in a relationship with you. We're not married. She says, I'm not moving out of my house, and we're not breaking up, she declared. Yeah, good luck with that. And that's pretty much how my Sunday night ended. After our parents left, Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more. We kept running in circles around each other, and I had to curb my natural inclination to run her down until we got a resolution. Truthfully, I was pretty damn tired as well, and I just wanted to turn off my brain. Believe it or not, we just ended up sitting on the couch and watching a movie together in silence until it was time to go to sleep. We left it there with the "we'll talk about it tomorrow" and retreated to our separate rooms. Yeah, they're so worn down, they're like, all right, let's go watch a movie. On Monday, I woke up to a large handwritten letter slid under the door from Sarah. Oh, God. I took a brief look at the first few pages, and I decided I would deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still in bed. She must have been up late writing the letter. Was it 18 pages, front and back? And you guys are watching the show Friends. Admit it, you watched Friends 25 years ago in the episode when Ross and Rachel, they broke up, and they were patching things up, and she wrote him a freaking letter, 18 pages front and back. And he spent the whole fucking night reading it. It just popped in my head when I heard that. At the office, I rescheduled some meetings and started calling venues and vendors that were on my list. The other ones were being handled by Sarah or her parents. It was a mixed bag of results. The catering people were adamant that I pay most of their fees under the pretense that they had ordered most of the food. I shot back at them over this like they were expecting me to eat a week's worth of old steak. But my appeal fell on deaf ears. I tried talking to the woman who ran the catering business and explained what happened, but that seemed only to firm up her resolve to get as much money as possible out of me. Inversely, the DJ that I had hired for the entertainment was incredibly kind and gave us back almost all the money. It wasn't much, however. Things went on like this during the day, between making calls and doing work, and I read Sarah's letter. Now this is 20 pages of written words. I'm just going to summarize. What did I tell you? At least it wasn't 20 pages front and back. The gist of it was that ever since childhood, Sarah had been bullied by Evelyn, and in response, Sarah's way of dealing with this was to essentially go along with whatever Evelyn wants to hear. I get dynamics between siblings and family members can be very tough. A lot of childhood shit that comes into adulthood. But that's not an excuse for various actions. And you eventually have to stand up for yourself and be an adult and do what you fear. End of freaking story. This is her way of getting out of this and making excuses for her actions. She went on to say that it had become some sort of general way of operating in her life, that she was just too afraid to rock the boat, to cause a problem, or sometimes even to voice an opinion. I reflected on this because, truthfully, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of think that Sarah was a bit too perfect of a girlfriend. I think he's referring to her always going along with things and all that. I don't know, was she that generous in the bedroom? That could have been enjoyable. What I mean by this is she never disagreed with me, never picked her plans over mine, or never even really advocated too strongly against anything I wanted to do. She went out of her way to make herself appear useful and all around acted more or less like a yes woman in our relationship. Well, I don't see the problem with this. I mean, we had never had so much as a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument until now. Well, if you haven't had a disagreement so much as one in 6 years, that's a problem. Because you can't have two people being together all the time. They're not going to butt heads every once in a while. It's how you handle it that makes or breaks. That's the difference between a really effed up relationship and a good one. Got to be able to communicate, but people are going to disagree. End of story. And not to mention that women fucking test guys all the goddamn time, particularly if the guy's acting like a bitch. It sounds great from a relationship standpoint until, of course, it's not. I couldn't shake this feeling that Sarah has this deep-seated insecurity and need to make people happy. There are a lot of people pleasers in this world, guys, and one that always has to question their words and actions. Are they genuine? Are they doing it out of fear that you might leave them or something like that? But it's still, in my opinion, not an excuse. You know what they say, people-pleasing behavior. When I started looking at this way, a lot of things started to make sense to me, and I started to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I don't actually know her that well. It's like she put up this image around her, which is really just a mirror, a reflection of whatever she thinks people want to see, and in the case of our relationship, she's more or less acting my role as a perfect girlfriend, while never really letting me inside to see who she really is as a person. Hell, I can't even say that what I see in those text messages is the real Sarah, because it's almost certainly just another reflection. It's this time of Evelyn and all her warts and faults. That may be the case, but still. Can you trust being married to someone who has that attitude towards cheating, help somebody else cheat? What happens when she is angry with you, or her needs aren't being met, or she's resentful because she's with you and she can't be her real self, or any number of shit? You see what I mean? This may sound weird, but it's like we are in this unequal relationship. Whereas maybe she loves me for who I am and how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve. But maybe I only love her for the mirror she's holding up to my face. Yeah. And people like that, you don't often know who is the real them. You know? They could be different people around different people, you know? I don't know. If this sounds too metaphysical for you, then I'm right there as well. It's like this wisp of an idea that I'm still trying to find on my fingertips. All I know is that in the last few days, I probably learned more about Sarah than I had in the last 6 years. And the letter she wrote to me was the first real view into her childhood that I had glimpsed. You'd think in 6 years you know her a lot better. But obviously, if this is true, and I have to question some of this if it's true, you know, they'd have to start over if they started over, and well, you never know how these things work out. But here we are at the car alarm again. I swear to God, I'm going to get my fucking tire iron and go smash those windows in a second. Fix your fucking car. That night, we talked more about this, specifically about her childhood and her behavior. The conclusion that we came to is that she needs help. She's a grown woman who is sadly stuck acting like a child, too scared to displease anyone, lest she face her sister's wrath or her parents' disapproval, or the loss of love from the one she loves. This is in no way to have a relationship, and I can say that I feel much more confident and assured that my decision to call up the wedding was the correct one. Good, I'm glad you're sticking to that. In fact, I could not be any more correct. That night after our talk, I went to bed with much less angst than I had in a few days. So this basically brings me up to our last update, and once again, it's a freaking novel. I won't wait 2 or 3 days to do another one, otherwise I'll keep falling forever. For people who have been wondering, the entire situation with my brother is more or less resolved until I get to tomorrow, but the situation with Sarah and I is still up in the air a bit, but there's a semblance of a plan going forward. I promise to get to it as soon as I can, but as you can imagine, there's a lot to write, and I can only do what I can do. Thanks. So that is an update here for the part 6? Part 6. And it's been quite the story here. And as you can see where this is going, he's starting to see his girl, or his ex, a little differently. But, okay, she's a people pleaser. And some people may say, okay, that's yet another mental problem, because it seems like everybody has a mental problem nowadays, and therefore they don't have to be blamed for their actions. But he's now getting to the bottom of all this and seeing where this goes. But nevertheless, still good the wedding is off, and we shall see in part 7 where this whole thing goes. But anyhow, guys, thanks for listening. This is a long one. But be sure to comment down below and just think about this, and I will see you later tonight.